Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review episode 4 of Loki. So, right off the bat, I would say, a lot of garbage before this moment. But when we finally actually get to episode 4, it actually feels like we're finally getting somewhere because, of course, this show may not be that long, so it has to get somewhere. We could either assume that this is maybe going to be probably an 8 or 9 episode show like WandaVision was, because this feels just like WandaVision to me. I'm expecting the kind of rollout that WandaVision did is going to be the exact same of this. I don't feel it's going to be like a 12 episode thing or a 10 episode whatever. I think that this is just gonna just wrap up fairly soon here. But I don't know how many episodes this is gonna be. But this episode I did enjoy, even though reasonably I was like, oh, okay, so they're going this route now. They're trying to make something more and more confusing to be something that is well, wait a minute. I wanted more answers. I can't wait till next week so that way I can get. That's the thing. That's what WandaVision did, was eventually gave you this big episode where it's oh, now I want to know the rest of the journey now that I'm stuck watching this show. I actually want to know what's going on. And I also want to know what happened to Mobius in this episode. What happened to that guy? And also, where the heck is Loki by the end of this episode? The original OG Loki. Because there is also a end credit scene at the very end of this episode. I don't know if there was end credits scenes many of the episodes before. I didn't check because I really didn't care about the show. But I guess there is an end credit scene at the end of this episode that actually looks rather cool and is to be something that I'm going to be talking about in spoilers. So if you missed it and you want to hear what it is, or if you just can't be bothered with this show and just don't want to go back onto Disney Plus to see what the end credit scene is, then come on down, because here we are. So I would say that this is a okay episode. I guess thumbs up close to saying this episode is a finally good episode, because it has to be. Because it's getting close to halfway, or whichever way this show is going to just play out. There is going to be a appearance of a certain Asgardian that people are going to be yeah, about. Maybe when they are to see him, or just be well, I wish it could have been He-Man. I wish it could have been He-Man. Ghostbusters 2. But yeah, there is a Asgardian that makes an appearance in this show, and technically towards the end credit scene, there's technically certain Asgardians that appear at the end of this show, but none of them could probably be all that mighty or all that beard wielding characters, I guess? Question mark. You'll need to see the end credit scene to know what I'm talking about. But there might be some Asgardians in the end credit scene, but it might not be the Asgardian that you're thinking of. To kind of spell this out for people, when I say any words of Asgardian, it might not be the immediate thing that you're going to come up with and just say, oh yeah, it's got to be a mighty some person, right? Well, you'll just have to see when I talk about this in spoiler terms. So, thumbs up episode, because we actually got somewhere. We actually did a thing. We actually told some people some stuff, and they're like, oh, thank God, knowledge. Because this show has been garbage for the last 3 episodes. And thank God they gave me something. They gave me something worthwhile. Plus, we got to see the actual timekeepers, even though there were statues of them before. I wanted to see them real live and in color to just be cool. Better than statues. And that's kind of what I've been waiting for. It seems that Ravonna Renslayer, the guy that's been... or the guy. The girl that's been Mobius's boss actually seems to actually have some importance in this episode. It seems like we're actually really having this episode really unravel to find out what is actually going on with all of the variants of every bit of all of this stuff. And I'm just like, wow, like so. But it also like leaves so many questions at the end of this episode. Just like, who is like who is forking over the dough for all of this? Like who is putting all this together? Who is like timekeepers, yes, but who is technical timekeeper or timekeeper? Timekeepers? Time things? Who's all going down here? What's all happening? And that is the real confusion in this episode. So we are to leave off with both Loki and Sylvie going and seemingly having this kind of bizarrish connection that is to eventually lead them to be back into the arms of the TVA or the Minutemen, whichever you want to say or name them to be. And really, I will just leave it at that. There is a cool, interesting memory that Loki is to have about some friend of his, and really, Loki is to also eventually really start to unravel this whole thing, and to basically Loki is bringing Mobius some hard hitting stuff, really finally telling like Mobius like what is really going on here that he doesn't even know. And so like that's the real gripping part of the show, the big unveiling, the big reveal of this show. And even B15 even knows what's going on. She even understands what's going on. And that's going to lead her to sneak away a bit in this episode. And, like, everybody, like, hands on deck, because what ended up happening to C20 is a big thing. Like, the girl that was just losing her freaking mind with all the people in the previous episode before, where she was in the one mart, the one, like, mall place, and she was just like, I figured it out, I saw it at whatever, and she was like losing her freaking mind, and Mobius was like, what is she talking about? Mobius wanted to go back and talk to C20 in this episode, but they're like, no, nobody can talk to C20 in this episode. And they're like, well, why? Like, if anything, we should like debrief her. And Ravonna is like, no, we're not gonna debrief. No, like, if anything, I've already debriefed her, and believe me, it was really brief. Like, we really just we really just sealed the deal on C20 for sure. So yeah, and there's a whole reason behind that. So I think I should probably get into spoilers about this episode because I'm trying to I'm trying to cryptically say this, and I feel like I need to just spell it out to people. And so, really, Asgardians, a little bit of an Asgardian kind of play out here, but yeah. So overall, just a solid, okay episode, of almost good episode. But really, it just left so many questions for me to just be like I'm struggling with my thumb. But yeah, but it's like, it was better than the crap we got before. So that's all I have to say. So let's go into this. Let's go into that double 5-time territory. I'm going to tell immediately who the Asgardian was that was in this episode. So go ahead and watch this on Disney Plus. I'm going to immediately spoil who the Asgardian was who was in this episode and who the Asgardians were at the end credit scene. So watch the entire episode, come back to me and say, that was a good episode. Or like, some people may have loved this episode and some people might have felt indifferently. and some people might have still hated this show, and some people might be like me, where I'm just kind of lukewarm about this episode, but overall positive. So let's get into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we do spoil this episode. So, spoilers now. So, Sith is back. Sith is back in MCU world. Wow. Like, well, technically in a flashback, but it's still. Like, supposedly people have said that more than likely Sith will be in Love and Thunder, but you never know about these movies. But like, seeing Sith in Asgardian world, like just having her just be in a flashback thing where like she's just kind of doing what she's doing, because I remember supposedly Sith had, I guess, at some point gotten really injured during a part of the Thor films, and maybe that was her kind of hesitant about coming back into these. But just having her here as a flashback or whatever is just really nice. Like, I liked the fact that we had Sith. I think a lot of people were like, man, I would have loved to have seen Thor or just Odin or somebody. But I'm like, well, yeah, but we haven't seen Sith in so long, so it's just nice to have that, like, a person that we haven't seen in so long, like we remember that she's alive in this world, and so like that's a big positive of this episode. So, but let's immediately get into also the end credit scene. So the end credit scene, if anybody missed it and just want to hear what I have to say regardless, so Loki is to appear in this spot, and all of a sudden there's a number of different comic book variant Lokis that are all to like kind of give like Loki a hand up, because they want him to go with them on to the next episode where they're going to be involved in some variant war, I'm assuming. And I'm like, wait a minute, so we're getting like all kinds of Lokis. We're getting like comic book accurate Loki, we're getting younger Loki, we're getting some like barbarian-ish looking Loki character that I don't actually know who he is. Like if anything, IMDb calls the one like comic book accurate Loki like classic Loki, and like there's a whole different kinds of like Lokis that I'm like, yeah, like especially the younger Loki, I'm like, yeah, that seems like a cool thing. Like that, like when I immediately saw that at the end credit scene, I'm like, oh, so as Guardian of the Galaxy, but he does like I don't want to like I don't want to seem like it's going to be an Asgardians of the Galaxy kind of thing, when really it might just be uh like the Loki variants or the whatever. But like I think that this might churn or spurn out any number of maybe Loki comic books probably after this, because this show might have been a cattle prod or whatever to get like a different set of like, this might be like a Loki verse or whatever, like how like Spider-Man had different number of Spider-Man in his thing. Maybe this might be Loki verse, so we might be getting that. So that might be like a popping off where everybody's like, oh my god, I love the classic Loki, I love Kid Loki, I love whatever the heck else Loki, barbarian looking Loki, or whatever he was. I don't know. A lot of people could confirm to me whoever the barbarian Loki was, because I didn't see him in IMDb, so whatever. So let's get to the very beginning of this. So both Loki and Sylvie are at still the place of that neon looking planet esh like thing, and they're just watching comets fall and seeing the world end, and they're just like, man, like I can't believe like we're gonna die here. And Sylvie is mentioning how like she remembers bits and pieces about Asgard, but it's been such a long time. And so here's the thing. Ravonna had brought in this female Loki and brought her in as a variant because the goddess of mischief was not supposed to exist. A female Loki was not supposed to exist. So so Sylvie was taken in by Ravonna as a variant and was to be tried. So Sylvie was to take Ravonna's. Let's go with Renslayer. That sounds cooler, and plus, I'd rather say Renslayer because I can say that easier. So, so Sylvie took Renslayer's device, her little thing to teleport her anywhere, and Sylvie left. So Sylvie just commandeered Renslayer's like device while Sylvie was to be tried by the timekeepers, and so Sylvie took her device right before Renslayer was to take her in. And so Renslayer has been blamed for that, like her entire career, about the one slip up of Sylvie taking her device and leaving and creating this whole event, creating Mobius needing to go after said other Loki. So Mobius and Renslayer and B-15 are just kind of like, now, like, we need to find these variants. We need to have these like taken care of because they could be anywhere. And so Mobius is like, we'll find him. So Sylvie and Loki are just kind of like talking, and so Loki is like trying to find more things about like Sylvie and like talk about like her like remembering Asgard and stuff like that, because she has the ability to have like enchantments to do all number of kinds of things. And so Loki is to seemingly have this connection with Sylvie that seems a little bit more of something just beyond like, well, hey, I could probably be a friend to this Sylvie. And it seems like when they both have this almost like life-ending moment, it seems that Loki is to almost fall for Sylvie. And that evidently creates a nexus event that Mobius is like, oh, like we spotted this nexus event inside this world-ending thing. And so so Mobius and people go and find both Lokis and retrieve them. And so now Mobius wants to try and figure out how Loki had created this event during a world-ending thing that seems kind of like, how exactly did he pull this off? And Loki is just like, I don't know what you're talking about. So Mobius just kind of like is just kind of wearing down Loki by putting him in a bad memory loop where like Loki is to be shoved through this door where he is to be in this bad memory loop over and over and over again. And this bad memory loop is something that Loki had done to Sith. Loki had cut Sith's hair, and now Sith is getting revenge on Loki for doing this. And so every time she is to like call him names, kick him in the nuts, and consistently just hit and hurt Loki every single time, where eventually Loki is to eventually like stop Sith and say like, Sith, you need to help me. Like, if anything, we're in this bad memory, and like, you need to help me, Sith. Like, please help me. And so, like, Sith just goes on and to kick Loki in the nuts yet again, and just like repeats the same thing over and over again. This endless loop until Loki just keeps getting freaking hit in the nuts too many times and beaten up too many times by Sith to where he finally just like confesses to her that he's like, hey, like I did this to get attention because like I feel like I'm alone and I feel like I will always be alone and blah blah blah, like all this sadness like speech. And so Sith is to pick Loki up and hit him in the nuts again, and then just no. She's like, she is to grab onto Loki and say, "Yeah, and you will always be alone." And so she just walks off this time. So finally, Mobius, after talking to Renslayer and asking about like, "Hey, are we gonna ever like get a debriefing of C-20? Like if anything, like I want to make sure that she's like perfectly okay." And Renslayer is like, well, to tell you the truth, C-20 had to be like C-20 had like completely lost her mind, and like now like we just had to just like take care of her. Like she's gone forever now because like she had just like whatever Sylvie had did like had done some real damage, and like C-20 was just talking all kinds of nonsense. Because eventually, like Renslayer was telling Mobius, it's like, hey, like don't tell anybody else because we don't want this to seem like all of a sudden everyone is just going to start unraveling. It's just like it's just that like this was just a one-time incident, and so we just want to just like nip that in the butt. So Mobius is just like, oh, okay, like wow. But so so eventually Loki is to pull or Mobius is to pull Loki because Loki before he had left Mobius, Loki had mentioned that the timekeepers are lying to the TVA, and Mobius like had that just thing just burrow away into his head, and like, well, why did they lie? Like, what are you talking about? And so eventually Mobius is talking to B-15, and Mobius had said what Loki had said to her, and that affected her because B-15 is already just kind of like freaking out. It seems like she's kind of jittery, or she's just kind of like consistently like we need to go and find these variants. We desperately need to go and find these variants. I think because she desperately needed some answers, and so the only person that she can come to is one person. So eventually B-15 is to go and get to Sylvie and take her to a world-ending event so that way they can talk. But we'll get to that. So Loki is to sit down with Mobius, and Mobius is kind of like, okay, like, what did you mean by what you said? Because Loki is to like kind of like just talk about how like how like let's so Loki Mobius talking. So eventually this pulls to eventually Loki like confirming that like, yeah, like I'm going to tell you as much as everyone else. Every single one of you are all variants that had gotten pulled and had gotten all your memories wiped and now are working here for the timekeepers because you were all variants at one time and everything of your life was just not a real true thing. And that's the big hoopla, is everyone's life of these people of the TVA had all been a lie. They were just all variants just to be forced into this one spot. And Mobius is like, oh my god, wow, like, so, like, I'm not a real person. Was just a variant that had just my memory wiped to eventually now just be here. Wow. So, and eventually B-15 is now with Sylvie, and B-15 is letting Sylvie give B-15 back some of her memories. Because when B-15 was with Sylvie, Sylvie was, like, when Sylvie was inside of B-15, Sylvie was giving back B-15's memories, stuff of her past. And B-15 was like, what was the thing that you put inside me? And Sylvie was like, no, that was there all along. I just, like, rebooted it. So that way you could see that, like, the timekeepers are lying to you. And so B-15 is like, well, hey, hit me with some more of that good stuff. And so Sylvie does so. And then B-15 realizes, like, oh my god, like, I was happy once. Like, I was, like I have some good memories of some other, like, some life that I did supposedly live. And so Mobius is kind of like taking what Loki is saying, and consistently Mobius is just like, is this a trick? Is this some kind of con? Like, what are you working? What's your angle, Loki? And Loki's like, there's no angle. Like, this is the truth. Like, I'm telling you the truth. And Mobius is like, but... So, eventually Mobius goes to Renslayer, and so the more that they talk to one another, the more it just seems like Mobius is like, I just don't know if I can trust my superior. Like, So, Mobius again brings up, like, C-20 again to Renslayer, and she's like, again with this? Like, again you're wanting to ask questions about C-20? Like, I thought I already told you everything, and I thought, like, the answer that I gave you was good enough. And Mobius is like, well, yeah, but I just want to be sure that I covered all my bases. And it just seems like more and more that Renslayer was talking, the more, like, I think Mobius was feeling that he was getting fed lies. And so he wanted the truth, even if it meant, like, the worst possible outcome to him, to Mobius. So eventually Mobius is to, like, share drinks with his boss, and Renslayer's like, hey, how about you, like, throw back a couple more? Like, if anything, this is a big celebration. We caught, like, both Lokis, and, like, everything's all good. Because Renslayer also mentioned that they had gotten rid of the Sylvia variant, that basically, like, she's taken care of. And so that's not true, because B-15 was asking her questions, so yeah, she wasn't taken care of. She wasn't reset or anything. And so Mobius is kind of, like, talking to Renslayer, and everything that she's saying is just a lie, so that way Mobius can't go to somebody and ask them questions about anything. Like, every single thing that Mobius is like, well, hey, how about I ask Sylvia something? And Renslayer's like, no, like, you can't ask her anything coincidentally. Wow, isn't that weird? So Mobius is just consistently like, well, probably in his own brain, like churning. It's like, well, now you're saying that I can't ask C20 anything. Now you're saying I can't ask Sylvie anything, and it seems like you're like stonewalling me for some reason or another. But I can talk to my Loki all day long, but I can't talk to the other one. This seems weird. Like, if anything, like Mobius would have said, like, well, why isn't my Loki like having the exact same treatment that this other Loki is, and like just gotten rid of? Like, why am I sitting on my Loki, but they got rid of the other one? Huh, that seems weird. So Mobius is to take his device and leave. And so Mobius is to go to a library to open up a device, maybe not his device. He is to open the device of his superior and kind of see what it says about C20. And supposedly it says C20 is deceased, but I guess there's a last video of C20 that C20 is to mention that when Sylvie had taken control of C20's mind, that C20 had lived some moments in a previous life, and that C20 had made the consensus that everyone is all a variant. And so now Mobius is like, oh, okay, so like C20 knew and Sylvie knew, and so Renslayer was hiding this from me. So Mobius goes and retrieves Loki to just be like, okay, something's up, and like we need to speak to the timekeepers about all this because something is up. So Mobius is to go and take Loki, and then immediately we have Renslayer and a bunch of her people there, and Renslayer had mentioned to Mobius when they were to talk to one another, like, if you could go to any time and any place, like, where would you go? And Mobius didn't really have an answer. He's just like, you know what, I just love working here. I just, like, want to just keep on working. That's all that really matters to me. And so when Mobius is caught by Renslayer with Loki in hand, Mobius is like, you know what I really would love to actually do instead of what I said before? I would love to go somewhere and like just play with that jet ski. The one jet ski thing that he mentioned before, that he like did all this research bizarrely all on this jet ski and he doesn't know why. Maybe that was the one blip of Mobius's memory that he kept, because maybe they didn't delete everything. And so maybe the jet ski was the one thing that like Mobius was trying to figure out. And so they deleted him for it. They killed Mobius. Maybe. Maybe they didn't. But so they just drudge Loki off and the other Loki to the timekeepers to, I guess, just say like, we gotta get rid of these things. Like they're causing like an infection that is starting to spread in the TVA. So we gotta get rid of these people and take them to the timekeepers to either wipe them out or something. So Renslayer takes both Lokis to the timekeepers, and so we have B-15 who is just like, you know what, I'm gonna go and help these guys out. And so B-15 chucks Sylvia a knife, and so now like Loki and Sylvie are fighting off these TVA guards, and then eventually like the timekeepers are all like talking, and all their dialogue or whatever that just kind of felt like nothing to me. And so it seems like the timekeepers have diddly squat worth of real actual power. So Sylvie just goes up to him just chops one of their heads off, and like the head goes like falling down. It's like, well, I guess these guys didn't really have powers after all. But then Loki is to grab the head and to find out the timekeeper is actually just some robot. So this is some kind of like Chuck E. Cheese freaking animatronic that is to just be like displayed here, but it's really not the actual timekeeper thing. And it's like, wait a minute, so who is all putting this together? Could it be actually Kang the Conqueror this whole entire time? Could it be someone else? Could it be like the Watcher? Could it be anybody? Because they didn't actually say. Like, is there some kind of like Spider Verse event going on, and we're just gonna all of a sudden see Madam Web just pop in here bizarrely? Because that won't happen because she's a Sony character and you can't have that there. But maybe it's gonna be the Beyonder. Maybe it's the Beyonder. I don't know. Maybe it's the God. It's got to be some weird, goofy thing. And maybe a lot of people will already be making their consensuses in the comments. Who you think that the next the next thingy will be? Because man, like I'm hoping it's King the Conqueror, but like because that's the only like actual time entity that I know of. But supposedly King the Conqueror might be in the Ant-Man movies, and so I'm like, so wait a minute, was that a swerve to just say that like maybe Kang like because I think they revealed right away that Kang was the villain of the show, but I think they also wanted to like swerve it so people would get confused, and then like maybe like people kept bizarrely saying that King the Conqueror was going to be an Ant-Man movie, but then everybody also said that King the Conqueror was going to be in the show, and Owen Wilson was going to be King the Conqueror, but then all of a sudden that's slightly tweaked or changed or something else. And so like have they already spoiled the show before the show pops off? I'm so confused. Or maybe Ant-Man, or maybe the King the Conqueror is in the Ant-Man movie, and then we're just having some other time eternal person to deal with in this show. Sure. Because why not? Um, I don't know. I thought, like, I would think that they would have something, like, big here, like, really big to, like, the Avengers world, but I guess not. Like maybe we're just gonna have to just keep trickling at this thing to see what comes out of all this. But anyways, so Loki is to just say, well, I guess we're just gonna have to figure out like the riddle of who the heck the real timekeepers are. And so Loki is just like, well, like you know what, Sylvie? Like if anything, I guess the whole real Nexus event thing like is making me just realize that like maybe there is something here. And Sylvie is like, well, huh? Like, and so Loki almost is to go and hug Sylvie, and then all of a sudden Renslayer is to come in to basically just banish it or vanish the Loki character. And we are to assume that all of a sudden, like, Loki is now dead. We're assuming Loki is dead, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what? But then all of a sudden, at end credit scene, we are to see Loki appear with all these other Lokis to now be going into next episode with all of possible Lokis. Like, is that where the one variant of the one Loki is, where it's like President Loki? Because maybe, like, there's one variant where Loki is, like, had conquered the Earth and became president, and maybe that's it? Maybe we're going to get a wide variety of Lokis in the next episode? Maybe. I don't know. That's going to be really cool, though. Like, I guess that's where that Loki poster comes from, is from, I guess, Lokiverse. Probably that maybe that episode won't be called that, but, like, I'm assuming we're going to get some Lokiverse episode. Uh, Maybe all the Lokis are gonna compile together and fight the real timekeeper or timekeepers. I don't know, but I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.